Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Suzanne Carawan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at High Road Solution, and we're presenting today using digital for market research as part of our November series under our thought leadership platform of High Road U. So I'm delighted that you have joined us today. This is going to be part of kind of an ongoing series because it's something that we're doing a lot more of in our own client work, and I think that it's an exciting topic. I've got some background and some academic endeavor into the market research kind of area, so it's exciting for me. And I also think it opens up a whole new set of tools and conversations that we can have together in the association industry to hopefully be able to move us forward. So today we're going to start off with talking about just kind of the idea of what is digital, why using digital for research, and kind of how people are doing that. Talking about some of the almost, not even almost, real change management issues in talking about using digital for research versus some of the historic ways that we've traditionally done research in our association space for membership in particular. We're then going to talk about some of the personas and lead scoring and journey maps, and as soon as you get into that aspect, it becomes very apparent why it is that you need to do digital research and why that's so important to have up to the date, up to the mere minute kind of research so you can have this continuous feedback loop. Talk a little bit about the tools, and then overall, how do we pull it together and get to this thing that every organization wants, called the digital footprint. So to start off, let's just take a moment and step back and say, what is digital? Now, I've taken this these three key things, and this is actually the definition from McKinsey, a very well-renowned consulting firm. And so I think it's interesting that as I was doing kind of some background research for this webinar, I sat down and I said, digital, when I think digital, I immediately think about the channels that are, social media and web and mobile and video and all these types of things. And I thought it was interesting that as I was looking at the body of work out there, digital started to have a much broader meaning, because there is this idea right now that organizations are going through a digital transformation, and that especially associations need to start thinking about how, and not just thinking, but taking action about getting on this pathway to transform themselves to be far more digital. And so from that context, you have to ask, what does that mean? Does that mean using social media? Because we're all doing that. No. Being digital means that we are really disrupting our current business practice. We are really questioning what we're thinking about using, et cetera. As a matter of fact, I just hopped off a call with an organization, and they're using marketing automation right now, and their big question, they've gotten down to, they're only using their association management system for one specific thing, which is membership. And their question to us, I thought, was so great. Their question is, certainly there's a better way, because all of our rich data, all the data that really talks about our membership and their interactions and what they're doing and their propensities and their preferences, it's all happening in the marketing automation system, right? So how can we use digital now? And they're asking us, can you help us take that next step? How do we, either, they were saying we need to unshackle ourselves from some of these maybe tools that we've always had, but how do we break free in our thinking to also be able to say, we've got to embrace the world that we're in now with this very digitally savvy consumer who is not the same consumer of yesteryear. How do we engage with them? How do we create value? How do we operate? How do we hire our staff? How do we do all of this in this kind of new world, right? And that's a big piece of digital. Another one is, how do we do this in a way that we can deliver value, which is supposed to be our foremost mission in associations? How do we do that? By creating different processes and going about things differently, right? And that's a big question. Earlier, maybe last week, I was talking to Rebecca A. Church, and her whole idea, I said, well, I know her as being the, and this is just so perfect, I know her as being the AMS lady. Like, she knows all about the AMSs, and she does AMS vendor selection, and she knows helps organizations find the best fit, etc. And I said, well, and she wanted to hear from us more and more about marketing automation and how it fits together and some of the things that we're doing. And she said, listen, I don't want to be known as the AMS lady anymore. I want to be known as the virtual team lady, because what I really think associations need to do is rethink top to bottom their entire staff structure, the way that their workplace looks like, the workforce that they do, how it is to work in a modern world in association land with all the things they need to do. And digital, of course, can unleash that. So that is a far broader example of digital. So we're going to talk about using digital for market research. We're going to narrow the focus a little bit to talk about how we can use it to go get, in particular, new members. How do we use it for growth is usually how we're using it now. But more so, in order to even do that piece, it behooves us to start thinking about how our organization functions. Because what we hear all the time is we can't move to marketing automation because of X, Y, and Z. And it's because it's the organizational constraints that's holding them back. They are not moving through digital transformation. They're not having the right leadership. They're not thinking about how they can be disruptive, right? They're just saying, well, really, we're just maintaining what we've always done. So I think it was good to talk about what McKinsey thinks. So what's that mean, right? So what I'd say is digital offers new ways to understand the user. So we can be more effective in matching needs to wants. Right? So that's a much narrower definition. But from an association standpoint, for most of us, what we really need to do right now is grow. So most organizations are calling us up at High Road saying, please, High Road Solution, can you help us grow through digital? Because why digital? Because there's a couple of big advantages to it. So from a channel perspective, digital typically is associated with this plethora of digital tools out there. So that might be all the aspects of social media, web, text message could be in their email, mobile, video, the whole arsenal of things that are interactive tools, which goes from surveys to learning management systems to benchmarking tools to, maybe a MBA is right for you. Maybe you want to be a plastic surgeon. Is breast augmentation right for you? All these millions of kind of self-assessment interactive tools that you can take online, to being at an event, to have an interactive kiosk, right? All the event technology. All of those kinds of pieces within there would be under the auspices of digital tools. And so the whole idea then is that we have so many, and also online community, it goes on and on. We have so many options now. We have so much availability of tools, and that we need to figure out how do we link them together and how do we make sense of them in a comprehensive way, right? So for most organizations, when we come in and audit them, typically if you go to the marketing department, you go to the event department, they're using somewhere between 10 to 15 different tools to get work done. If you really counted up all the different pieces of software that they're using, etc. So it's quite a bit. So again, one reason, as a side, why do organizations go to marketing automation? Because it shrinks all those different little independent tools down into a more consolidated tool set. But the reason you do all of it is because you want to measure, right? I want to be able to measure. I want to, the organization, I want to be able to put out content. I want to be able to put out some sort of call to action. And I want humans out there to interact with my organization virtually, but we have a digital dialogue that I can measure. Because otherwise it's just like me talking out to a microphone or to a phone, and I have no feedback loop to find out if I'm being halfway effective, right? So that's why we want to go to digital and use some of those. Why use digital for research? Well, this has huge benefits. Number one, it's like using digital for trying to find and nurture and convert new members. Using digital for research, it's pretty hard to beat the cost, right? Digital tends to be the lowest cost way to communicate at the same time as measure, right? I have near instantaneous feedback. So I'm capturing real activity. So kind of, if I'm looking at digital for research, sure, I have like historical pieces of using a survey, but surveys tend to be self-reported, have kind of a high margin of error, have a high margin of, or a low margin are the people that actually participate in it oftentimes, and they get stale very quickly because you're taking one point of time, right? You're capturing one little slice about what happened in that person's life when they filled out the survey that day. And what I'm missing is I don't have that continuous flow to understand, was that a fluke? Were they mad that day at the conference evaluation and they said, this is horrible, the food's terrible, it's too cold in the room, X, Y, and Z? I don't have a way to know. So my feedback from a point in time kind of survey is inherently rife with some sort of, error, some margin for error. If I can actually capture real activity on an ongoing basis, I start to diminish out, I start to get rid of, or at least decrease the margin of error. Because I'm looking at now a larger set of data that over time is going to be able to be very clear as to what the real patterns of activity are. Okay, that is a very different thing. So I have real-time data, and I'm able to understand real-time ebbs and flows of the data. I'm able to understand, is this an aberration? Is it a total fluke? Or is this something that looks and feels and smells like something we've seen before? And that type of modeling is obviously what is used and what everyone desires, so we can start to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So we're starting to use digital now to really help us to get into looking forward instead of backwards, okay? Think about all the hurricanes we've just had in the last couple of months. So they have multiple different models, and if you're like a Weather Channel aficionado, you're like watching the European model, it's the spaghetti model. They have all these different models that they're using, but they're now being able to use it because they've been capturing so much historic hurricane data, as well as they have all sorts of sensors out there that's feeding in real-time data. So they're using both. Historic data, still absolutely valuable, and they're using real-time data to be able to do that storm tracking, to be able to make the right call at the right time. Like, let's evacuate the state of Florida at the right time, when we really need to, versus, we're just making a guess. So they're trying to get the probability of prediction to be at the highest that it can possibly be, right? So that's the real reason to do it. Now, from a historic versus predictive, when we come in and we talk about what metrics you have, do you have a KPI dashboard for your organization? What are you looking at digital? Even though it's 2017, 9 times out of 10, we hear on the KPI dashboard, we have 3 metrics: number of unique visitors per month, number of opens of email, and the number of click-throughs on email. Those still dominate as the 3 metrics that people are using. Nothing wrong with them. They are data point, but they're historic. They're not telling us that next step about what is the person actually doing. Did they actually take the next kind of steps of the sequence of events and convert? Did they actually take the desired action? Okay, so the historic data that most of us as an organization capture are those pieces, along with things like number of purchases, right? Number of transactions, number of event registrations, number of members that renewed between year 1 to year 2, number of 5-year members. There's all these data points, but they're quite static. They're quite static, and they tell something. They tell us a story, they do, but they kind of tell us a story that says, here's where we are. They're really kind of a baseline metric saying, here's where we are, and that's the story. And so at some point, we want to start looking at moving that again to being a more dynamic process. Again, most of the data that we have in our organizations are very much based on demographics. So the way we've done our segmentation is based on, job title, where you live in the country, committee participation, etc. And it's not necessarily based on behavioral data. This whole shift towards digital takes those 2 things and turns it on its head, because digital is about looking at that continuous sequence of events, continuous flow of user behavior, constantly looking at the user and figuring out, what did the user do? And then therefore, what should we do? So it's inherently, when I'm studying somebody's digital footprint over a period of time, the question that pops up is not, oh, that's interesting, The question is, what should we do about this, right? What should we do as the organization with knowing the behavior that we're seeing? We are now feeling that we need to respond. It elicits some sort of emotional response in the organization, or at least it should, right? It's like we're watching children and they're continuing to try to go through a maze, and we are watching from above and we continue to see them turning the wrong direction. It becomes very upsetting for us. We're distressed. We're like, oh no, just turn right, turn right. And if we're watching digital, we should pretty much have the same reaction, because we can see where our users have gone astray. We can see where our users didn't go through the proper steps that we thought they would to get to checkout in our e-commerce. We can see that they didn't go through the process. They didn't look like they were interested in our video that we wanted to show them. And we can see that, and we can say, what can we do better, right? So moving into digital, the more and more we adopt and we get into this flow of digital, the flow of information, we get into the digital transformation mindset, we organically, right, move to more of an agile mindset. We get into a process where our organization is saying, hey, and what happens is you start to speed up. If you think your organization is too slow, the more and more you adopt digital, you will see it inherently start to pick up the pace, right? It'll pick up the pace. One thing that I think that historic data does to our organization is it gives us a false sense of security. It's like looking at my bank statement. It's like, okay, here's what I spent. And you go, well, what can I do now? That's what's happened. It's done and done. Oh, well, I shouldn't have spent on something else, or I did this, etc. And you look at it and you note it, and it's noted. It doesn't, again, get the staff, get everybody to piquet their interest. It doesn't get us to think about, well, what does that mean for us? What should we be doing? What else could we have done? And the more and more you move to digital and you start looking at more real-time data, that's exactly what happens. Exactly what happens. And so I'll just, as a side note, there are some people who don't do well with digital. They don't do well. They find it very distressing. They find it upsetting. It's the same group that didn't like social media because they felt like, oh, I can't keep up with it, or what if somebody says something bad and I can't, it's that constant flow, right? So it can be very overwhelming for some people, and that has to be something that's managed for the organization, right? It's but for the people that are more familiar with digital, embrace digital. It's very exuberating. It's exciting. It's very exciting. So you get into it because I can make something happen. I can watch what's happening, and the organization, can therefore react. I can put something out, either proactively or reactively, to help the users do a better job. So the more I can look at market research and understand that, I can understand how the next steps of what our organization should do. And it really does cut down on the guesswork. So if we're talking about the idea that the organization, am taking in real-time data, right? Or I want to get there, or I want to grow, I need to remember that who I'm interacting with are people, right? Humans on the other side of digital. And I find when I go out and I provide counsel to organizations and I'm consulting, it's one of the first things that I go through, because it's amazing to me how many people just don't have a visual concept of what's happening in digital. So they're creating, the common one in associations, they're creating an email, and they're just putting an email, putting in content, and hitting send, right? And they're very worried about, did I have a typo? Did I have a good subject line? They're worried about all the aspects of production, and they're spending little to no time thinking about the reaction of the person who's going to open that email in their inbox. They're thinking very little about that. And you have to have a mental kind of viewpoint of thinking about that person, right? This is a digital dialogue. So creating the digital experiences, in order to do that, we need to have a visual as to what the person is that we're creating the digital experience for. We want to map out how we want them to react, and we want to identify who we're really going for. So as soon as we hit any of those points, the world of personas naturally opens up for us. And so personas are, again, a typified view, it's a typified story, really, of your kind of ideal buyer or your very non-ideal buyer, right? So it's trying to typecast, if you will, who you want as well as who you don't want. So you're going to create this kind of story and about who you want, and you're going to identify the people that you want. And again, for growth, you're going to you may or may not have them currently in your membership. But you're going to do that because you need to be able to create and craft in your mind's eye experiences that are going to delight these people, delight the persona that you're going after, right? It helps you to focus what you're doing. And so much of market research today is about helping use digital to define these personas, okay? So we use personas because we want to be able to differentiate individuals. We are, in the world of digital, you are far, far away from the world where everybody gets a trophy, where everybody's of equal importance, of everybody. Digital is just not structured that way. Everybody can be out there using digital. It's like, go for it, you know, be the best you can be. But we use digital to try to differentiate individuals from one another, right? We're trying to understand, okay, there's millions, think billions of people out on digital. Who should we focus in on? We can't focus on everybody. We have got to get out of thinking like we wake up in the morning and other people go to www.ourorganization.org, right? We have to rid ourselves of that thinking. We have to think of digital as this whole world out there, and we have to somehow get in front of the right people. So we're going to use personas to help differentiate our organization. At the same time, we're going to try to say, hey, if I have one persona rather, there must be other personas like them. So how can I use that persona to attract like-minded people? Once I can do that, I want to nurture them through some sort of journey, and I want to be able to help to predict their behavior, right? If I can do that well, I'm taking down my cost per new member, or cost per new customer, or cost per new certificate, down to probably the lowest level I can, right? And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do if I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to be able to get so good at my game that I can predict what you need and provide it to you at right time, right place, right person thing, right? And if I can do that well, I can, of course, increase my satisfaction and my stickiness. So if I'm doing that well in digital, and I've got engagement, I'm pulling you through the funnel, and I'm nurturing you, and I'm taking care of you all the time in digital, I'm automating that. Well, when it comes to between year 1 to year 2 renewal, that should really reduce my attrition rate, right? Because why? It's constant touch points, continuous touch points, and I'm continually learning, and I'm kind of creating a machine that can know that, all right? So personas, think about now we're switching over to saying, we need to research and create some personas. So how can I do that, right? So what are some of the questions that I would ask? So in doing any sort of market research, these are pretty much the same questions. It's just now I'm going to be able to use digital to probably even get more understanding about my persona, because what I'm trying to crack the code on is understanding their preferences, their predilections, their interest areas. I'm trying to kind of create a, well, what would they do in this situation, right? How influential are they to their peers? And I'm trying to get a real handle comprehensively on the individual that we're talking about, okay? That is sometimes that's a mind shift for many of us who were taught, you know, it's business and you have to separate business from personal, and you can only look at like business pieces, right? I can only know, okay, well, you're a CPA and you work at this firm, and you are in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the firm is between 11 to 20 people, and it's a $5.5 million to $7 million firm, like those straight demographics. We can use those. Those are still critical, but they're very cold and clinical, right? Critical, but clinical. They don't tell the story. I can look at that and I can say, great, I still have no idea what that person is likely to do, right? And personas is what we're trying to help to round out those demographics to be able to get a better understanding of that type of person, that type of mindset. So some of the questions that we'll ask, and we can answer through digital quite well nowadays because of the plethora, just the massive amount of information out there. We can ask questions like, where does the persona get info? So if I've created a persona, I said, this is my ideal buyer, I should be asking, what are the areas what are the channels, how does this person get information on a daily basis? When they go to buy a product, when they go to join as a member, you know, how did they come there? What got them there? Have they heard anything else? You know, are we controlling the information that they're using, right? Do they even know that we exist? Those types of questions are really critical. How can I crack that code in the world of digital? One of the best probably tools, and we have a whole list of tools in a second, but one of the best tools out there is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a phenomenal marvel of information. So I can go to I was just doing a persona workshop this week with a client, and we're all talking about, let's talk about, you know, if I could have, you know, 10 more of this person, this would make all the difference in our association in the next 5 years, right? Like, who are the next 100 members that we want? What do they look like? Who are they, et cetera? And we're going through that exercise. And one of the women in the organization said, oh, I think it's so-and-so. So we looked up her LinkedIn profile, and we started going down these questions to ask these questions. Can we probably ascertain by looking at her LinkedIn profile, you know, some of the things that make her tick? One of the questions is, where does she get her info? Well, if you looked at LinkedIn, there's several things. One, it tells me my job title. I can see where I work. Okay. The likelihood is you're getting information from your place of employment. Then I can look at places the person went to school. Likely, they're probably alumni, getting information from there. I can see what groups they belong to. Okay, probably likely getting information from those groups. Sometimes people have interests. They have extra volunteer activities they do, etc. They're really telling their informational story in their LinkedIn profile, if I'm reading it from a critical eye. So I can start to capture where they're getting their information, and I can start getting a gauge on, what type of person is this? How liberal versus conservative? What kind of interest areas do they have? How involved are they? If they're in a committee and they're alumni, probably they're really reading their alumni newsletter, things like that. So there's all sorts of information that I can pull out of LinkedIn, et cetera, to understand where they get their information. If they're on Instagram, if they're on Facebook, if they're on any YouTube channels, you can see what they're subscribed to, you can see who they follow, you can get a real sense of what information that this person is involved in, right? Then I want to extrapolate that out to a bigger persona and try to paint a picture, okay? I also want to ask, what's their information network look like? So if they're getting information from, let's say, CNN or certain sources, their friend network, their peer network, their collegial network, what does that look like? How big is it? How many connections they have on LinkedIn? How many Facebook followers do they have? What about on Twitter? So the expanse of their information network might tell us something about them. I can use any of those tools to start to collect that data and understand their realm and sphere of influence, right? Because ultimately, if I want to grow an organization, I want to identify a persona that's going to either inspire people or make them say, I want to do that too, or how they get that position, right? And I want to use some sort of demand generating capabilities there to do that. So ideally, I would craft a persona that's something that is highly connected, an influential person. I want to identify those people in my association, okay? Because that's going to help for much more rapid growth. I also want to look there and say, do we see things in there that says that they're a loyal, kind of quote-unquote loyal person that's going to be capable of retention, okay? Maybe they're just a complete job hopper. They've never been a part of an organization. If I look at a persona and I say, this is my ideal member, this is going to be my 1% who's like my future committee leader, they are like the people that are in your committees now. If we go back in time, the probability that they were also involved at the college level, at the high school level, at the elementary, junior, middle school level, they're those people. They've been on student council and yearbook. They were cheerleaders. They were the captains. They were they were in all the kind of leadership positions, and that's nothing new. They're just those people. So we have to say, do we see some of those capabilities for retention? And that can show up in our digital research. And we should say, is that something that's important for us in crafting a persona for who we want? Another thing you can use digital for is looking at how fixed versus growth is their persona's mindset. And that's, of course, based on Carol Dweck's whole massive body of research that she done that was breakthrough. And she wrote a book on mindset. But what we need for growth, if we're serious about growing our organization, then what we probably can't do, it's not going to help us to go after everybody that we're kind of bringing into membership kicking and screaming, right? If we have to constantly be spending time saying, but this is the benefits, look what you get, look at the discounts, and it's too much kind of pitching and selling, the likelihood is they're probably maybe in a fixed mindset, and they're not, it's too hard. What we need to do is get the energy going for the association and find those people through digital who are growth mindset people. Growth people bring a tremendous amount of energy. They're engaged, they're curious, they get other people involved, etc. So how can I use digital to try to ascertain whether or not this persona or this person I'm trying to study, to base on my persona, whether they're in a growth mindset? Well, some of the things you can see are their curiosity factor, right? Are they people who say, I love in trying new food, traveling, I like to go new places, I like to meet new people, all indicators of growth mindset, right? And you can certainly ascertain that by looking through digital, following people, researching and saying, oh, look, you know, this person has gone to all these places, they've done all these things, here's all their connections, they're always traveling. Probably somebody who's going to be influential in helping other people say, you got to do this, you got to try it, okay? How else can I look at fixed versus growth? If you have somebody's LinkedIn profile and I'm looking at somebody who's been in the same job for 16, 17 years, the likelihood of their growth minded is not so high. It could be that they just hit the jackpot and has an amazing job and has always grown with it and love it dearly. Not saying it doesn't, but the likelihood is growth people tend to move positions fairly frequently because they're looking for growth, right? So you can oftentimes see that reflected. So you also have to say, hey, if we as an organization want to grow, look at our staff. Do we have growth-minded people, right? Do we have people that are fresh and excited and they want to be able to do this? Or do we see, like, you know, changing jobs or a job hopper that's bad, you should be here forever? It's one of those things you have to question in today's world, right? So a couple other things we can ascertain from digital. We can see, you know, where their time is spent. That's incredibly important. If we're trying to grow our membership or say we want more people to be part of our certification program or come to our events, they have to have the time. So we can understand through digital research, we can understand where they are in their life cycle of their life. You know, if they've got, you know, 2 kids under the age of 4, you know, probably don't have a tremendous amount of time to pick up and go physically to some event. We need to understand that. So we can understand all of these things that we probably, everything I just mentioned right here, I highly doubt anyone asks us on their membership satisfaction survey, right? But this is the information that makes all the difference when I say, if I put out a new product, are they going to buy it? If I put out a new product and I wonder, is this going to hit? I probably, if I've taken these things into consideration, my probability of having a match of that product and having it take off is much higher, much higher. Lastly on this, just a great question to ask as we're doing the digital research and we're watching people and we're researching them and we're building that persona, we're trying to understand, how does the person measure worth? So if we're talking again about what is important to someone, we have to understand what's going to matter to them, right? So if what they value is a discount, then they have to understand that we need to give them a discount, right? But if we don't see that there's any evidence of that again, they value long-term relationships, they value opportunities for being a public speaker, then why are we immediately saying our membership value is discounts, right? And oftentimes we're not really looking at our new market to say what that looks like, right? And that's a big thing that we can really start to look at and ascertain in digital. So once I really start to hone in and start using my digital tools here to kind of craft this story about this persona, and then we're going to look at one in a second, we also have to ask a couple of key pieces, right? So we need to say that, and this is getting into what's called the buyer's journey. In looking at digital research, we need to understand, or the research we can get back continuously, is we can start to say, okay, this persona that we've developed, number one, is it so future focused that they don't even know we exist? So number one, are they, is the persona aware of the need for our services as the organization? Are they aware of the need? If they don't have awareness of the need, we have to stop for a second and we have to stop trying to sell our products and services, because it's just not going to work. They're not even aware that we exist or that they need us. They're nonplussed by our whole existence. If they're aware of the need, then we need to start saying, okay, how do we lead them through this process? Okay, so if we know that they've got a need, we've solved that problem, where does our persona go to research the need that they have? So maybe their need is, I need professional development, okay? Where do they go for that? Do they go to Google? Do they ask a friend? Do they see a flyer on the wall of their university? You know, what does that look like? We need to identify where they're going to find you. Again, very rarely does anybody just happen to know your organization's name off the top of their head and can just type it in and go direct, right? Most of the time we have to get in the persona's head to say, what are they searching for? How can we do that? Of course, we can use digital from keyword searches, etc., to be able to figure that out. Okay, so we can use digital research to try to figure out how are people researching this need for us. If I go to Google AdWords and I'm putting in keyword phrases or long tail keywords and I'm finding that they're very expensive, then that's probably a popular way to know that people are using that set of keywords to find us. I should probably take that and incorporate it back into my content on my website, etc., and be able to do that. Okay. We also need to understand with this persona the who, what, why, where, and how. So how would they make the decision to join your organization? How would they do that? How can we use digital research for that? That's when probably now getting a little bit more down to using some of your current members or current members that match your persona, or doing focus groups comes in, right? And we can do those a couple of different ways. It doesn't have to be a big laborious thing. It can be that you're doing it, again, via Zoom or digital or webinar or a survey. There's a whole different kind of ways you can do that. But we need to kind of get into the how they made the decision, what points they stopped, what were they considering, how they went about that. Okay? We need to understand their time frame for purchase. How long do they take? Are they thinking, is your membership like something that they're going to think about for 12 months to 14 months? Maybe that's not the right person. Right? We need maybe people, again, growth is going to be a quicker time frame. And also understanding the risk and resiliency levels will help us to craft the right product, program, etc. Okay? So let's look at an example persona here. Here's one that we developed a couple years back now. But we've developed a persona, and his name was All-American Adam. And so a good persona literally has a picture, they have a name, we have all this information about them, and that what we want to start doing is the organization adopts it, and they start saying like, well, okay, we're going to come up with a new conference, a new session at the conference, and we want to put this out there, and we want to say, well, what would All-American Adam think about this? Right? So we start to use the personas in our product development cycles. That's a huge piece of personas. So you're using personas for who will be your target buyers in the future, for who you want to attract, and then you're running through all of your products and programs to be able to bounce it off now that you know this persona, to say, what would they say about this? Would this be appealing to them? Who would this be for? Right? That way, we should not be surprised when you launch a product or service. It should not be a surprise how well it goes over, because if you've done this type of work, right? You could develop a project like this is exactly for All-American Adam. So for All-American Adam, we've written down his professional aims and attitudes. We have his demographic types of data here about Adam, as well as some kind of behavioral data about Adam. And we also have something called purpose drivers. Purpose drivers are telling you what's going to appeal to Adam, right? So purpose drivers, if our persona is the guy, this is All American Adam, he's like all for the association, he's a volunteer, he's a committee member, he goes to every conference, you know, he tells everybody about the association, he sees it as part of his identity, he's all about improving, he's trustworthy, he loves his family, he loves his association, etc. So if I look at my purpose drivers, that's going to help me to, when I go to messaging, it's going to help me define what kind of message and how I should approach a future All-American Adam. A future All-American Adam is going to totally get it when I say, you should be part of our association for like the good of humanity, right? For the good of our industry, for being able to move stuff forward, for paying it forward. He's going to totally dig all of that. If I come at him and say, hey, it's all about, you know, saving 10 bucks, I've lost him. It's not interesting. I have to be able to create a message that's going to be compelling based on his purpose drivers, right? So my digital research is helping to establish that and put that together. All right, so if I have those pieces in place, then what I'm going to do is understand the funnel. So how do I put this kind of in action? So I've created a persona based on my digital research I've done. I have created my messages and my products, and I've crafted it so it's going to appeal. I'm writing to the persona. I am putting down I'm crafting my video for the persona, right? Everything I'm doing, saying my images, my words, etc., have been crafted to appeal to that particular persona. And what I'm doing then is I'm putting it out into the world of digital so that I can attract the unknown people. All those people who are not aware of us, all those people that we don't now have email addresses for, all those people that we would love to know that we think our market landscape is big enough that we should have 10,000 more members, whatever the case might be. We want to take those offers and put them out into the world of digital so we can attract new people into our funnel. And so we're going to do that, and we're going to start to use digital research now as we pull people into the funnel and start moving them down the process of getting to the point that they convert to become a customer. We're trying to pull them down, and we're going to measure them every step of the way. This is where we dovetail with content marketing. So I have put out, let's say that I have an offer, and I'm going to give a free salary benchmarking survey away. So I'll ask people to come in, draw them to my website, draw them to something that they can put in their information, put in their salary information, and get back how do they fare against other people. I have to have something compelling that someone that doesn't know me from Adam is going to click on it. So I'm going to create my benchmarking survey. I'm going to have it, you know, on my website, on a landing page, whatever, connected somehow. And I'm going to now create, let's say, digital advertising, do Google AdWords. I'm going to put out retargeting ads. I'm going to put out blogs, whatever I can do. I mean, I could do billboards. I could do TV ads, radio ads, print mail. I could show it at a trade show. Any of these mechanisms that I can use to point this person back to my interactive benchmarking survey, right? Once I put that out into the world, I can measure every one of those things I just said. Every channel of attraction I can measure. So I can start to do my research. Okay, which one's working? Which one's not? The people that then say, yeah, I want to click on the banner ad and take me to the salary benchmark, I'm starting to go from that unknown into the narrower part of becoming a prospect. I'm going to gain their email address. I'm going to see, do they complete the survey? Do they not? If they don't, if they leave the survey, can I bring them back? Right? Who are the people that drive through? If they drove through to the survey, and then I send them an email saying thank you with another offer to, let's say, watch a video on how other people rate, then they click on that, and then they come to the video and watch it. Well, look, there's 2 other pieces of data I have that I can research. Now I'm moving them down towards a lead. Now I can see the people that watch the video for more than 2 minutes. What does that mean about them? Shouldn't I be scoring them higher as a candidate towards probable purchase? And so I'm going to use the fundamentals of the funnel, it's called the funnel, sales funnel, to lead people through here and research them all along the way. And that whole process of pulling through the funnel is the buyer's journey. And hopefully, my organization, we've artfully crafted this actual journey that we want to take people, right? It shouldn't be up to the user. We should not dump them at the doorstep of our website and leave them to their own devices, right? If we really want to convert them. We should have a mapped out journey, and we should actually be lead scoring them all the way through. So we can do something about it. So in this one, here's our All-American Adam. We're trying to create more All-American Adams, and we have outlined a process that we think is going to work. So we've created a blog post, then we had a, once you click on that and say, yeah, I'm interested, you go to a landing page, you get a downloadable resource, maybe it's like a PDF guide on salary. Then I can see, I send a follow-up email with another offer. That takes them back to a web page for a product purchase, then it dumps to cart if they're going to add it, and at some point they have an interaction and they purchase. That whole flow, it could be short, it could be long, it could be over 6 months, it could be over 2 days. That totally depends on your product that you're trying to push and your association and who you serve. All that, those are the dependencies. But the journey itself, I should map out, and I should actually put a score against each step of the way. That way I can use my market research right here to figure out how many people go from step 1 to step 2. How many people fall off? How many people did I attract? What channels did I use to attract? Okay, and I can use all on it, and then I can say, okay, I have found out that these are the criteria for what works. Okay, now I'm going to use more market research and say, give me a lookalike audience. Let me go after more people where we've seen this has successfully worked. Right? So I'm using all of my market research over and over to be able to set this journey in place, measure it, and then be able to kind of rinse and repeat. So tools for digital research and everything we've been talking about, where are all these places you can get all this data? Certainly all of our surveys out there in the world provide incredible data. And again, it's me asking you from a survey standpoint. Maybe you open it up and you say, you know, other, and you give them some kind of leeway to give you some feedback. But for the most part, surveys, again, are you're asking a question and you're getting responses to it, right? Google Analytics, of course, is going to be a key tool in your arsenal, so you can watch people flow through your site and see what keywords people are using, how long they stay on your site, when do they leave your site, all of those things. But that, again, people have to first get to your site. They have to first get to your website. We probably need to, for growth, we can't wait for people to get to our website. We got to go out and focus on how do we drive traffic to our website. Certainly a marketing automation system becomes a standard that is a best practice for doing digital research because it has all this bundled in here. I can look at that funnel, I can look at the flow, etc. Digital advertising has a tremendous amount of data in there for digital research. It's a great way to say, I'm going to put out an ad and I'm going to find out if what I'm putting out there is attracting the right people, right? Bringing digital advertising is going to bring people to your website so you can get them, you can study them. Anything with webinars, activity, you know, your learning management tools out there, anything where you log in, you know, all of those kinds of tools you should be able to use for digital research, right? Web tracking tools, and there's a whole new crop of tools out there called sentiment tools, which actually scrape the web and try to figure out what people are actually meaning by what they're saying, right? And that's a whole, they've been out, you know, it's really starting to come into the association market, but people are really enjoying that because then they can kind of use them and understand, hey, on their online communities or social media, do I have members who are kind of upset, or is anybody talking about me? If so, what's the sentiment? Those types of things. So again, I can take action with it. And certainly I can hopefully convince you on the power of LinkedIn and other social platforms, because they really do start to crack the code between the individual's demographics and actually the individual as a whole human. Okay, and so those are all very important. So kind of finishing up there, when you put all this together, we're all going for is what's called the digital footprint. And the digital footprint is kind of your sum total of all of your digital activities that you do and kind of your digital value. So the digital footprint, like how heavy is your footprint? You know, that way, if you think about like your footprint is often used from like a environmental energies kind of standpoint, right? Like what is your green footprint? So think of it as that way. So you're trying to understand how big is your digital footprint. So if you're someone who is super active on social media and all of our videos and on and on and on and on, you might have a very large digital footprint, right? If you're like a constant Amazon buyer and on, you might have a ton of activity about you. Then you might have some people who have very little. And what you need to start identifying is if I can compile all the findings of all these tools we just talked about, well, what is a good, and we have to, again, say, what does that mean? What is a good or an ideal digital footprint for our members look like versus, let's say, non-members, et cetera? So a good digital footprint for growth is going to look like when somebody has done this combination of activities and has this kind of lead score, et cetera. This is who we want. Somebody who's active and we can see it, we have evidence of it, right? Because ultimately we want members who are engaged and who are interacting with our organization. On the flip side, we also say maybe there's a different digital footprint for retention. So maybe again, and this is where I think most associations know this better. So for retention, if we see that this person has opened so many emails in the past 365 days and logged into the community and downloaded the mobile app and done all a number of things, we would say that they have a high, a score of whatever, 80 as their digital footprint. And so being able to craft that and use that as some of our benchmarking will help us as the organization be able to use in our future. We're looking for people with our personas. We're doing more research to say, do they look like they have the propensity to match our growth footprint? Because if they're already showcasing it now, the probability is that they're going to showcase it once they're a member, right? And that would be something that we would probably see as a good thing for our organization, okay? We probably don't want to go out and just recruit a bunch of checkbook members. While good for revenue, not necessarily good for the next 10 years of the organization, right? Might be good for the lift now, but we probably need to look at that and say right now, if we need to kind of restock our membership, we probably need to restock it with growth-oriented people, okay? So being able to look at those growth footprints and seeing how that might work for now and for retention really helps us to say, we're building to last, okay? So we can look in there and say, what are those factors that make the difference? All right, so in wrapping up for today, we're gonna kind of come away with saying that use digital for market research first. In many cases, right, it's a little bit more on the, do it yourself kind of thing. You can certainly do it for cursory research, but it can really give you, again, far more insight into what's happening. And if you're hiring a research agency, make sure that they're using all these tools because, again, just using surveys and things like that, it just doesn't give you the full picture that we need in today's world to make decisions. Digital is going to give us far more real-time data. And again, the whole point is to get into that sense and respond where we're able to use data to be able to figure out what we should do next. So instead of being a historic snapshot, to be a proactive stream of information so we can go ahead and figure out what to do. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you on future High Road U webinars and topics and tools of Kids of the Month. My name is Suzanne Carawan. I'm at High Road Solution. If you need anything, please just don't hesitate.